Cosmic Origin of Ismael Perez, but for only 20 people. I want to keep it short and intimate because it's very interactive. I'm going to go over chapter 3. For those that sign up, that is a 90-minute course. It's a personal, intimate, and you could access that course through my website, ourcosmicorigin.com. So again, that's only restricted to 20 individuals. First come, first serve. That's coming up in about less than in about 8 days now. And yes, my friends, today is the 18th of April and 2026. And you know it, we're still in a positive timeline trajectory. How exciting is that? All right. So back in 2016, several whistleblowers that came forward that defected from the secret space program mentioned some 22 genetic experiments that were operating here in our solar system. In other words, our Earth is like a genetic DNA farm, or it was rather. But these 22 experiments actually go way back, and some of them were actually infiltrated by certain groups in order to create certain hybrid races that were not part of the original human design. And so what happened to these 22 genetic experiments? And how far are we in terms of completing the 22 genetic experiments? And most importantly, what happened to the Super Federation? Well, they were dissolved. They were dissolved because of the fact that, according to the Galactic Archives, the power to control, or rather, the authority to conduct these genetic experiments ended in 2018, okay? Because of the fact that now we are ending the cycle. So these 22 genetic programs are now coming into fruition. Well, this idea, guys, that humanity is not an accident of nature, but a result of a long, multi-layered process of refinement that was carried over from other worlds, one that blends biology, consciousness, and even the intention as a cosmic story is all part of this. So within this framework regarding the chronicle of the human design involving the 22 genetic experiments, Earth is portrayed as a convergence point, a living crucible where different streams of intelligence, often described as star races, have contributed to the shaping of the human template. So within this lens, the history of the 22 genetic programs has emerged as a symbolic map of evolution, expressing humanity's journey from instinct-driven survival towards integrated awareness. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. The 22 programs that represent distinct evolutionary influences, each associated with a different archetypal lineage or even region of the cosmos, and these are not to be understood as literal competing species conducting experiments, as of course revealed by some of the whistleblowers, but as a symbolic current of intelligence or currents of intelligences, each embodying a different quality of development. So for those that are new to my channel, we as humans are actually the potpourri of all these different races that contributed their DNA to 22 different experiments in order to create the ideal being, which is us. And a lot of this began with the Lyran archetypal blueprint, which is also known as the core worlds, right? The origin of all human life forms began in Lyra, which established the physical template and foundational form of every human being throughout the universe. So that is the first archetypal blueprint that we have. We all have that underlying Lyran archetype. In addition to that, we also have the Sirian archetype, which is part of a trinary star system, A, B, and C. And that is what allows us to have deep emotional intelligence and heart-centered awareness, right? In addition to that, we were also given the Pleiadian archetype, which is part of the cluster of stars that our solar system belongs to. And that allows us to have intuition, creativity, and greater social harmony. Not to mention, we are also infused with Arcturian archetype, which is the higher dimensional pattern recognition and advanced cognition. It allows us to access that. And we were also given the Andromedan archetype, which is the archetype of freedom, sovereignty, and independence. We were also given the Orion archetype, which represents duality, right? Orion has been extremely polarized, and a lot of that has to do with the galactic wars between those that were service to self versus those that are service to others. And so that allows us to collapse the polarity into singularity. It allows us to resolve all conflict. It allows us to emerge as Christed individuals through the dissolution, through the neutralization of polarity. And then we were also given the Vegan archetype from the Lyra Vega system, which allows us for artistic expression and vibrational sensitivity. We were also infused with Ontarian archetype, which allows us to become more stable and allows us also to align with the planetary field. We were also infused with Mintakan archetype, which comes from the Orion belt, and that helps us with memory loss, unity, retrieval of past lifetimes. The Mintakan archetype is good for that. Not to mention, we were also infused, and I talked about this today in our cosmic history class, where I broke down the cosmic history, the galactic wars. We also have the Maldekian archetype infused in our genetics, which allows us to learn lessons of misused power. And not to mention, we also have the Atlantean archetype, which is earth-based archetype that was technologically advanced, and of course at the expense of spirituality. But then we have the Lemurian archetype, which is the opposite of that, so that we could balance it. And the Lemurian archetype gave way to emotional and spiritual development without physicality. So when you combine all of these 12 archetypes, guys, you have the perfected human, which is what we are, okay? So the Lemurian archetype is corresponding to our ability to become extremely emotional, and the Atlantean archetype allows us to integrate our spiritual, emotional sense of self with the proper and ethical use of technology, right? There has to be a balance. So in this new world, as we transition into the golden age, once again, the Lemurian archetype and the Atlantean archetype, which is really the culmination of all the other archetypes, they have to come into balance in order to usher in what is known as the seventh golden age of enlightenment. Now, together, all of these races that I mentioned form a library of traits, a type of multidimensional inheritance that is encoded into the human template. So, according to many esoteric records, these programs are described as being in competition, right? Each seeking to produce the most advanced or powerful version of a being. Well, when you interpret it according to the original galactic records, this competition reflects something deeply, much more than that, okay? And what that means is that it reflects the tension between intellect and emotion, right? It's all about balance, the pull between individuality and being part of a collective unity, the balance between technology and spiritual wisdom, which is where the Atlanteans failed, right? So rather than external groups competing, this can actually be seen as internal forces within humanity itself, each vying for dominance and shaping our directions. So the most powerful being in this context is not the being that seeks domination, but the being that seeks integration. A central theme in this revelation is that much of humanity's potential lies dormant, right? 96% of our genetic material is inactive in the literal sense, but as unused capacity in perception, creativity, and awareness. So the culmination of the 22 programs symbolize a turning point, a shift from fragmented identity towards integrated consciousness, a shift from reactive behavior to intentional awareness, a transition from linear thinking to a more holistic, systems-based understanding way of doing things. And so this activation is less about biology changing overnight and more about how humans perceive, connect, and create meaning. So the completion of the 22 programs, as revealed by the secret space program whistleblowers, represents the emergence of what might be called the integrated human archetype, which is really the end result of these programs. And this is the human archetype that is grounded in the physical world, yet capable of abstract thought. The human archetype that is not only emotionally aware, in touch with their feelings and others through emotional intelligence, but yet guided by reason. The human archetype that is not only an individual and preserves the individuality, but yet is connected to a larger social, ecological whole. And so in metaphysical terms, this is something described as a being who can actually navigate complexities with clarity, hold multiple perspectives all at once, and act in both intelligence and empathy. It is a balance, guys, okay? So viewed through a grounded lens, the story of extraterrestrial genetic programs can actually be understood as a cosmic language for describing real processes. And that is that biological evolution over millions of years is all part of this, okay, experiment. Cultural evolution through shared knowledge is a big part of that. Psychological evolution towards self-awareness is a big part of that. So the cosmic blueprint is becoming more of a poetic way of expressing that humanity is being shaped by many influences over time, right? Rather than a single origin point. So the 22 genetic programs ultimately point to a profound idea here. And that is that humanity is not incomplete, has never been incomplete, but it has always been in progress, a steady progression that was carried over from other worlds, other galaxies, and ultimately other universes. So we are the end result of that, my friends, okay? The competition between these programs actually reflects the diversity of human traits. The activation reflects the expansion of awareness. And the final outcome reflects the possibility of integration. In this sense, the most powerful being is one that begins to integrate all of this into a coherent whole. All right? That is the end result of these programs. So, this next part of the presentation, guys, comes from a Galactic Alliance briefing that I was able to access through the Alcyon records, which is the central sun of the Pleiades. And this is a transmission type called Harmonic Analysis of Consciousness Fields, subject regarding the shadow genetic programs and the attempted mind hive architecture of unauthorized functions. So we have the positive programs, right, that I just mentioned, which were designed long ago, millions of years ago, that were carried over from other worlds that contributed their DNA, other races, and ultimately other universes, right? We are the melting pot of the cosmos. right here. Okay, so these other programs are known as the shadow genetic programs that apparently were also conducting their own unauthorized experiments. And a lot of this ties into the genetic experiments that were conducted by the Anunnaki through Enki, the genetic master geneticists, and of course, the programs that still continued through the shadow government. Well, within the broader evolutionary framework of the 22 genetic programs, there was a parallel development that emerged that the Galactic Alliance archives identified as the shadow genetic architecture. The shadow genetic architecture. And these were not aligned with the process of sovereign consciousness. Instead, they explored collective intelligence models that were based on control, uniformity without question, and a centralized directive system. And so these darker genetic programs, according to the Galactic Records, were unfortunately conducted by a negative group of mantis, insectoid intelligences, and some of the Nabu from Zeta Reticula 1 and 2, which are the negative zetas. And so these unauthorized shadow programs, as they call it in the Galactic Records, represent a trajectory of evolution where order, controlled order, centralized order, replaces individuality and freedom, and efficiency replaces self-awareness. And so those programs, unfortunately, were still continuing in these underground bases and labs, which, of course, a lot of the Alliance has already cleared, thank God, and they were being conducted by the shadow government, okay? And these programs, these shadow programs that were unauthorized by the Guardian Alliance, were actually carried over also from other worlds. Now, this briefing actually outlines the structure, the function, and the resolution of these divergent programs as the current cosmic cycle is now reached completion. So, the origin of the shadow architecture began in the 11th creation, which is the old universe, the old empire. According to the Galactic Alliance archives that are in the Alcyon records, they have indicated that these programs emerged as intentional explorations within the universal field of consciousness, testing the limits of unity without sovereignty, which is what? The eradication of free will. These systems have been characterized by centralized intelligence hubs, which were, of course, implemented by the Black Red Cube network, right? They were creating species that were connected to a mind hive controlled by a AI. And so these systems were characterized by centralized intelligence hubs. They were distributed biological or energetic extensions as well. They were minimal variance in thought and behavior, and they were most of all suppressing independent identity. They were trying to squash that, okay? And so their purpose within the cosmic experiment was to determine how consciousness could evolve through total synchronization alone without the variable of free will. And that is a no-no. That is a big no-no, okay? And this is what led to the mind hive construct, which apparently many races fell under in the galactic history. So the defining features of these programs is the development of what they call the mind hive architecture. Within these systems, my friends, individual awareness is observed into a collective processing field. Decision-making originates from a central governing intelligence that programs these entities, or units as they call them, into a certain role in society, in NPCs, right? Emotional and cognitive diversity becomes very minimal. There is none. And so actions are executed in precise coordination across all units. Well, while highly efficient, these systems reached a developmental ceiling. In other words, they reached a plateau recently as the absence of divergence prevented adaptive evolution. Certain alliance records have described the extension of these architectures into planetary environments, symbolically referenced as operations within subsurface or non-visible domains. We're talking about the underground genetic programs that were unauthorized. All right, a lot of these programs have been carrying out underneath the Levant, Israel, Iran, and all of that area in different parts of the world, right? Even here in America. And so from a metaphysical standpoint, these references apparently correspond to subconscious layers of planetary consciousness, hidden energetic grids and belief systems, belief structures, and closed loop systems that were operating beneath collective awareness. Well, these zones functioned as containment fields for control-based patterns that were influencing thought structures without direct recognition. And a lot of this ties into the lab-grown humans too, okay? A core objective of the shadow programs that were conducted by the negative insectoids, zetas, and mantis. I say negative because not all mantis are evil, not all insectoids are evil. There are positive mantis, and there are positive insectoids that work with the Galactic Alliance. So my microphone is itching me. The core objective of the shadow programs was the implementation, was to override free will and to create a mechanism of control. That was the entire objective of these unauthorized programs. And these were designed to unite all of these units into a singular directive controlled by a mind hive. Typically, in this most instances, they are controlled by artificial intelligence, telling these units what to do, right? Eliminating unpredictability without the system, maintaining stability through enforced coherence. And that is a big no-no. However, the Galactic Alliance have confirmed that free will is non-negotiable with constant free will is non-negotiable, constant within evolving consciousness systems. So any attempt to suppress free will results in stagnation of development, collapse of adaptive capacity, and eventual reintegration into the broader field. And so as the 22 genetic programs reach completion, the shadow architectures have undergone system-wide resolution. And so this process did not occur through conflict, but through expansion of awareness across the field, reintegration of suppressed aspects into consciousness recognition, and the dissolution of centralized control structures. So what does this mean? Well, the archetypal hive has been deconstructed at the level of influence, rendering its operational capacity obsolete within this current cycle. In other words, these shadow genetic experiments that were conducted by the negative insectoids and mantis have been dismantled. Thank God, okay? Thank God. The current cosmic phase marks a transition into a unified harmonic field according to the galactic records, where individual sovereignty is preserved, where collective connection is voluntarily, and intelligence operates through coherence rather than through control. So what does this represent? You guys like my Star Wars mug, cup, whatever this thing is? It's huge, huh? It was a gift from one of the Galactic Jedis. It's nice. I see all the Battlestar ships, the Death Star, and all the other starships. That's kind of cool. All right, so This represents the synthesis of the order that is inherited in hive systems and the freedom inherent in human evolution. That's what that means, without the distortions, of course. So, in this final assessment, the shadow genetic programs are now classified as abominations of the original programs. All right? They are classified as abominations of the original programs. Their integration has contributed to the stabilization of the final human template as a being that is now capable of independent thought, emotional intelligence, and cooperative alignment without loss of identity. So the completion of this phase has confirmed that no system that overrides sovereign consciousness can persist within an ascending field. No system that overrides sovereign consciousness cannot persist within an ascending field. And that's why those shadow programs have been dismantled. Now, it is believed that the cycle of imposed mind hives has ended not only on Earth, guys, but throughout the Milky Way. I did mention a few months ago that the Guardians were able to completely nullify and dismantle the entire black cube, red cube matrix throughout the galaxy. Thank God. And so the next part of the briefing is a transmission titled Temporal Lineage Analysis, and this is regarding the gray human programs and the restoration of the organic consciousness of a dying race. All right, well, before I get into this part of the briefing, I do want to mention this, that the grays are a dying race because they chose to disconnect to their emotional body. And for those that have read my book, our Cosmic Origin, where I talk about the entire galactic history, or for those that have taken my courses, the Greys were once humans. They evolved from a planet called Apex that originated in Lyra, and due to a war that they had, and again, a lot of this ties into a war where a faction of the Greys were leaning towards a technocratic development as opposed to spiritual evolution. And so that war resulted in a nuclear holocaust on planet Apex. So they devastated their planet, and the surviving Apexians, as they were then known, which were human, surviving Apexians were still human, went into the hollow earth. The planet Apex was hollowed, and they decided to disconnect themselves from their emotional body. They decided to not produce organically anymore. In other words, they took away their sex organs, and they completely resorted to cloning. Okay, so they became, eventually they lost their connection to God. And over a period of millions of years, they morphed. They went from looking human, and they morphed into these little big almond-shaped black eyes, big heads, long skinny arms creatures that we call today Greys. All right, so there are different types of Greys. Okay, so the original Greys were once humans. They were known as the Apaxians. And of course, there are other Greys that are like robotics, that are mass reproduced by different alien groups, including our shadow government, to be like little worker robots. Those are not the Greys that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Greys that were known as the Apaxians. Well, over millions of years, they morphed, they lost their connection to God, and their species began to die out. A certain group of them time traveled, right? They traveled from their future, or is it their past, into our reality in order to save their dying race. And so within the extended framework of the 22 genetic programs, and subsequent shadow architectures that were programs conducted by negative functions. The Galactic Archives have referenced a distinct evolutionary branch designated as the gray lineages. Okay, so again, the original grays were a dying race. They used to be human. So these lineages represent a civilization that diverged from their original organic human-like template, transitioning towards highly advanced synthetic biological beings. Well, this path resulted in extraordinary technological development, but at the cost of their emotional, spiritual range, at the cost of their individuality, as they became part of a mind hive. Again, this whole concept of becoming part of a mind hive and losing our free will with our individuality is part of the negative trap. Okay, that is all dark. We don't want to go there. So, at the cost of their emotional, spiritual range, their individuality, and direct connection to source by losing their soul, they began to seek out a solution. So the Galactic Alliance approved for those that they saw, that they were benevolent and that they were just trying to save the race, or in other words, they were trying to restore themselves. Those grays were approved. Okay, so we have to have understanding here that there are different groups of grace. Some are negative, some are positive. So the positive grays, who are just trying to save or technically restore themselves and reconnect back to God by developing a soul once again, all right? I'm going to be outlining the origin of this divergence in this briefing, were the ones that were successful at creating a hybrid race between us and them. So the emergence of recovery was initiated for those that are positive, and the development of hybrid restoration programs symbolically culminated in what is referred to as the Sasani race. The Sasani race is a future version of a human gray hybrid that was able to develop a soul and reconnect back to God. So that is known as the Sasani lineage or the Sasani group. So, all galactic records describe the grace as originating from a branch of humanoid evolution, planet Apex, that gradually prioritize cognitive expansion over emotional intelligence, technological augmentation over biological balance, and efficiency over experiential depth. And so over extended cycles, this resulted in reduction in biological variability, reliance on synthetic systems for survival, diminished connection to individuality and self-reflective awareness. And so this stage is often interpreted as a cautionary archetype, which means that intelligence advancing faster than spirituality is also a no-no, okay? And they're a great example of that. So, the transition to synthetic dependency happened when they eliminated their sex organs. And as this civilization evolved, its system became increasingly inorganic in structure. Biological functions were supplanted or replaced with synthetic parts. Reproduction shifted away from natural processes, and consciousness became stabilized within controlled environments. So while this allowed for survival and expansion, it also produced a very critical limitation as to why they had to time travel back into from our future point, their past, back into our reality. In order to what? To reduce capacity for extinction, okay? And to regain a soul. In metaphysical terms, this is described as a disconnection from the full spectrum of conscious expression. It is not an absence of awareness. It is a narrowing of its range. That's what it is. So we have to understand and recognize this imbalance because unfortunately, a good portion of humanity is going to enter that, right? That's called the technocratic dystopian timeline, transhumanism. So by recognizing this imbalance, segments within this lineage initiated what Galactic Alliance archives refer to as the restoration programs. And so the objective of these restoration programs for the Greys, those that wanted to realign with God, not the ones that were working with the Draco, was to reintroduce organic variability, was to restore emotional and intuitive dimensions back, and ultimately, guys, to reestablish a more expansive connection to source. In order to achieve this hybridization program was explored as a pathway to reintegrate the lost qualities that they once had as the Apexians of planet Apix. So the gray human hybrid programs aimed to merge the precision and stability of the gray lineages, the adaptability and emotional depth of the human template, and the result is described as a being that is capable of retaining advanced cognitive clarity, reassessing a broader spectrum of perception and awareness, and operating with both structure and flexibility. So this hybrid is not portrayed as superior neither. It is a rebalancing, a restoration of a lost, dying race. Okay, so in certain traditions, the culmination of these restoration efforts is symbolized through what is called the Sasani lineage, which is described as a future-oriented hybrid between current humans and grace. And some key attributes within this framework include balancing intellect with emotions. For the first time, the Sasani are able to do that, right? They're also able of maintaining awareness as an interconnected system. And they're also able to now reduce internal conflict between individuality and unity. And so a projection of what a fully integrated state of consciousness would become is that the notion that such a lineage connects back to earlier stages of humanity, going back to Lyra, right, the cradle of all human civilizations, symbolizes a very philosophical idea here. And that is that, sorry, I'm messing with my mic here. And that is that the evolution is not strictly linear. No evolution is strictly linear. Okay, because we're dealing with multiple layers, multiple dimensions, past, future converging into the presence. And so what this means is that not only is evolution not linear ever, it's never linear, it also means that the future possibilities can influence present choices and that the awareness of potential outcomes can guide development. So this is often described as a feedback loop of consciousness rather than a physical temporal intervention. It is a feedback loop of consciousness being influenced from the future, being influenced from the past, and everything in between. Does that make sense? Okay. The significance of these programs also lies in their convergence with the human path. Now, I just poked myself with something hard. Oh, that is darn. Why do we have all these nails here? What happened? No, all these nails here are poking me. I almost stabbed my head. Better take them off. I went back and I almost stabbed myself, and I see all these nails here. Not good. Okay, let's continue here. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So the significance of these programs lies in their convergence into the human path, ultimately. Okay. The gray lineages represent extreme structure without emotion, which leads into the inorganic, technocratic time loop. Humanity, on the other hand, represents emotion and individuality seeking balance, freedom. So the hybrid archetype represents the synthesis of both, where structure supports awareness rather than replacing it. And so, in this final assessment, the Galactic Alliance archives classify the gray human programs as restorative evolutionary pathways to a dying race. And so, the story of the gray lineages is also not a failure, okay, but a course correction. A course correction for those that are positive, of course, not for those that have leaned towards service to self, right? Which is draconian. All right, so in addition to all of this, the story of the Greys is one of course correction. It reflects a universal principle here, and that is that any path that diverges from balance will eventually seek reintegration. So through this lens, the emergence of hybrid archetypes symbolize realignment as the cycle continues, as it is now coming to an end, the integrating of all lessons into the present moment. And so the final integration is the emergence of the galactic human. The emergence of the galactic human. All right. At the conclusion of the great cycle describes a profound realization that is now beginning to dawn, guys. And that is not only within us, it is also within the collective field of humanity itself. And that is that the experiment was never about domination. All right? The human experiment was never about domination or competition. And it wasn't only just about one genetic program winning over the others. It was about integration. It was about integration. And so this leads to the collapsing of fragmentation. As the influence of the shadow programs dissolved, they no longer are in existence, thank God. What begins now to occur is a reorganization of consciousness. The competing archetypes is a balance of the warrior, the healer, the technologist, as long as it's ethical under spiritual evolution, the empath, the sovereign. They no longer operate in opposition. Instead, now they are beginning to synchronize in us. And that is the reason why we, in an essence, are the end result, but not only the end result, but the potpourri of all races throughout the universe. And in that regard, we are a brand new race, a more of a superior race in that sense, because we have the best of all these genetics within the human genome. Okay. And so what this means is that we ultimately bring all conflict to an end. That's what that means. Okay. So what that means is that now, instead of conflict, as we enter this new cycle through the ascension, there will be no more conflict within the universe. There will be no more division, only synthesis. There will be no more external control, only internal alignment. And so this is the true meaning behind the completion of the 22 programs. All aspects of the human template coming into harmonic resonance, which will return us to what? Sovereign awareness, the return to sovereign awareness. And so in this final phase, the defining trait of the emerging human is sovereignty. Sovereignty in this sense is the ability to think independently, the capacity to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, the awareness to act consciously rather than reactively. So it is the restoration of what the original divine programs intended in dismantling the shadow genetic experiments of the negative zeta, insectoid, and mantis group in order to allow for the full expression of free will aligned with awareness. And so there will be no more mind hive, only collective synthesis while maintaining our free will and individuality. This is what the law of one calls the social memory complex, which is not a mind hive. It is out of free will as we reunite with other minds, become a greater mind, right? It's called the social memory complex. There will be no external directive and no more imposed structures. Only self-governed consciousness that is operating in harmony with all others. As integration unfolds, perception itself begins to shift. Human awareness expands beyond linear, rigid interpretation into something more holistic, fluid, and interconnected. And so therefore we begin to see patterns instead of isolated events. We begin to understand systems instead of fragments. We begin to understand whole systems instead of just parts. And we begin to perceive relationships rather than separations, okay? And this does not mean abandoning logic. What it means is augmenting it with intuition and holistic awareness. The multidimensional mind is simply a mind that is capable of holding multiple perspectives at once, navigating complexities without fragmentation, and creating meaning across different layers of experience, all leading to the rise of the integrated being. The culmination of the 22 programs is giving rise to the new galactic human. Not a literal extraterrestrial hybrid, but a fully realized version of humanity's potential. This new being is characterized by clarity of thought, able to discern truth from distortion, emotional intelligence, capable of empathy without losing balance, creative power, generating solutions rather than reacting to problems, and cooperative awareness, learning how to work with others without losing individuality. And so the power once that was attributed to genetic superiority is now revealed to be something else entirely. And that is the power of integration, from completion to co-creation. Where the earlier phases were more described as competition between different programs, the final phase represents a shift into co-creation. Each archetypal lineage, each program is no longer competing, it is contributing. The analytical mind works with the intuitive mind. The technological impulse aligns with ethical awareness. The individual expression harmonizes with collective well-being. And so the result is coherence without the loss of unity, without the loss of uniqueness. Coherence without the loss of uniqueness. So as this cycle completes, is that me? I hear a cricket. I guess there is a cricket outside. So as this cycle completes, The story of the 22 genetic programs across all universes, which culminates here in our Earth, ultimately resolves into a single realization. And that is that humanity is now going to become the archetype of its own evolution, where knowledge is now going to be integrated rather than fragmented. And so a new cycle will begin as a result of that. A cycle that begins, that is not defined by external intervention, but by internal evolution. And so there was never a separation between the programs and the human. They were always expressions of the same unfolding process. In closing, the galactic human is not something we become. It is something we remember, refine, and begin to embody. End of transmission. The cycle is now complete. Integration is underway. And the next phase begins within. The next phase begins within. I do want to welcome all 2,300 individuals that are in the house. Thank you guys so much for being here. Karen Went, thank you so much for your super chat. I will give some shout outs. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the Folium. Let me just say this first. Disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, but I do believe in this product. I believe in detoxing your body from nanotech, metals, radiation, so that there are no parasites in your body. So I do believe in that. And so for those that are interested in getting a full body detox, I always put the link in the description and I always pin it at the end of the presentation. So yeah, I believe all three of them are in stock right now. Folium, I can't find the other one. Where is the other one? Folium Relax, Folium Immuno, and of course, PX. Quick shout outs to some of the Galactic Jedis. I would like to acknowledge Roy Toys Comics is in the house. I'm going to try to shout out to some of the people that I've never given shout outs before. Lorik Zhang is in the house. Film Wizard is in the house. Donald Hoover is in the house. Jackie Santana is in the house. Sunshine is in the house. Hi, Sunshine. Scott Lewis is in the house. Loreem is in the house. Ricardo is in the house. And last but not least, Kathy Mick is in the house. Welcome, everyone. Thank you guys so much again for being here. I want to thank Susan K for her donation. Thank you so much, Susan K. And for those of you that want to support my cause, I do have a Zelle through projectrestorationzion@gmail.com. That goes directly to me. So that means YouTube does not collect 30% of the super chats. So through that email, projectrestorationzion@gmail.com, I do receive Zelles for those that have Zelle. All right, Q&A time. Make sure you guys type your questions in capital letters. I see Joyful with her question. Thank you so much for your super chat, Joyful. She says, if you had an abortion in this third dimension and you ascend, will you have to get pregnant in birth? Will you have to get pregnant and birth that child like normal? No, it's different. In the fifth dimension, there is only a 3-month gestation process, not a ninth month. And it is less, it is in fact not painful at all to give birth in the fifth dimension. And when you ascend, do you reunite with that child? I believe so. Yeah, I believe so, because that child is part of your oversoul. It was never actually born. Yeah, I believe that that child probably chose not to come into the 3D. So I do believe that you will be reunited with a child that you've lost. Yes. Robin, Denise, or Denon Dawes says, amazing presentation, Ishmael. You are so welcome, sister. Who is President Brandon? That's another nickname for, I forget his name, Joe Biden. And he was never president, by the way. I've never heard of the reversed rapture. No, we're not. The war in Iran is now coming to an end, which reminds me, remember, about a week and a half ago, I gave a galactic report about how the commanders were able to buy some time and de-escalate the situation that would have led into a huge world war with China and everybody else jumping in. Well, the galactics are now influencing a permanent peace ceasefire. We got what we wanted. They are depleted from developing nuclear weapons. They don't even have uranium anymore. And we reopened the Strait of Hormuz. So again, that is a big win for the White Hats. Okay, big win for the White Hats. And again, if you guys wait till Monday, I'll go more into that. But right now, we are talking about galactic stuff. All right. Thank you, Dakota, for your super chat. Is Jupiter Command part of the SSP? No. However, they do work with the positive XSP Solar Warden and Space Force. Yes. And do Pleiadians and others have an SSP? Well, there are these things called extraterrestrial programs that were carried over from other universes. And then there are our own breakaway groups or our own secret space program. So yeah, we have different types of I don't want to call them secret space programs. I want to call them super soldier programs. That's what they are. Okay. SSP means groups that break away from primitive worlds, if you want to be technical. However, super soldier programs involve, many different realms, many worlds, and different dimensions. So the super soldier programs have been around for millions of years. Thank you, Joyful, for your super chat. She's asking, if a person dies within the past year, are their bodies in 100% crystalline, or will they be like our bodies when we ascend? 50-50. Well, if they go to the 5D, they will be 50-50. If they go to the 4D, they will be 25% crystalline, 75% carbon. So depending on the dimension they go to. I hope this new mic is much better. I hope you guys could hear me more clearly. Hi, Ishmael from St. Louis, Missouri. Hi, Colleen. Oh, thank you. So the audio does sound good. Good. Is there a healing center on Ganymede, which is one of the moons of Jupiter? There are healing facilities there, yes. In fact, some of the humans and children that were taken off world to be fed to the Dracos or to be enslaved on the Martian colony and other, you could say, outpost were actually recuperated and taken over to Ganymede for restoration. Mm. So apparently Hormuz closed again. Oh, I didn't hear that. See, I don't watch the news. Well, as of yesterday, they were open. So do I channel or am I a remote viewer? Neither. Neither. I get direct transmissions from the commanders, mainly Valiant Thor, Commander Corondor, Ashtar, and others. Thank you so much, Valentina Sunshine, for your donation. I appreciate that, sister. Do you still expect an EBS? That is part of one of the prominent positive timelines. So it's either going to be that or the solar flash. So I would say yes. What is a super chat? That is when you give a donation via the YouTube channel, I guess. That's what a super chat is. Can you tell us about the 35 levels above the president? Yeah, that goes into the Advanced Contact of Intelligent Organization, the ACIO, which I gave a thorough presentation of about 5 months ago, and that was completely taken out the next day. They removed that video from my YouTube channel. So those are the levels that are known as cosmic clearance, which are 36 levels above the president. I've never read the Voyager books, so I don't know. Thank you, political viewer. What percentage of humanity is awake now? I'm not sure. We have wings. Thank you for your super chat. Do you know where the Stargate is located in Sedona? Thank you for your work. It is in the mountains. It is in the mountains. Yes, we still have class tomorrow, Sunday. So that would be Ascension 3.0, 7 o'clock. Yes, because it's 4 or 5. It's 4 o'clock Pacific time. So yeah, we still have class tomorrow. For those that are in Ascension 2.0 and 3.0, tomorrow is the final class. Don't forget to show up, guys. Don't forget to show up. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. For those that are in my class tomorrow. And again, for those that want to sign up to my new classes beginning in 4 weeks. They are up for grab through my website or cosmicorigin.com. Ishmael, who are the Vikings? The Vikings were an advanced group of seafarers in ancient times that some believe were one of the lost tribes of the original Israelites, becoming the seafarers, escaping Rome in Babylon, of course. And then later, of course, they came back and they helped ransack Rome to its knees along with the other tribes. What are the 144,000? Those are individuals that are old souls that are here on the planet who are going to be able to embody all the way up to the 13th dimension, which is eternity, and are able to use 144 strands of DNA. Can you manifest what you need in 5D? Yes, you can. Deb Scott, thank you so much for your super chat. Today in class, you asked permission to connect with student mind to better understand question. How do you do that? Love your work and loyalty to us. How do I connect with your higher self? Well, by giving me permission, my higher self is able to gather your star origin from your higher self. Your higher self communicates with my higher self, and then I'm able to give you your star origin. That's what happened today at the end of our cosmic origin class, Debbie. Thank you, Thomas Day, for your donation. Greatly appreciated. Who are the seven sisters? Those are the seven major stars of the Pleiades, beginning with Alcyone, Maya, Electra, Merope, Atlas, Taygeta. Thank you so much for your super chat, Joyful. You are saying that when a person dies, they never get past the fifth dimension. They can return to the dimension that they came from, like we will. Well, if you came from the seventh dimension, you're obviously going to integrate reality all the way to the seventh dimension. So depending on where you originated from. How accurate is Edgar Casey? He's gotten some prophecies right and some wrong. So it's hit and miss with Edgar Casey. The sleeping prophet is, if that's what you're referring to. Who is Simjazi? Well, he was the leader of the 200 fallen angels in the Bible. That was his original name was Enki. Melissa Harper says, thank you for your service, Ishmael. You're welcome. I think Dolores Cannon was pretty accurate. I think she was. Absolutely. I think everything she talked about was pretty accurate. Well, I'm going to be meeting with Sasha Stone pretty soon. I was scheduled to have a Zoom call with Sasha Stone a few days ago, but I missed it. So we're going to be reconnecting again via Zoom. I do know who he is. Oh, you guys like that Simon Parks conversation that I had? That actually took place 2 years ago, but I thought that it would be a nice treat for all my new subscribers since we went back and forth on a lot of great information. But yeah, I will reach out to him again to see if he wants to do a part two conversation with me. Peaceful Warrior, thank you so much for your super chat. Hi, Ishmael. Last 2 months, I am feeling nothing seems to make sense in the outer world anymore. Also, I seem to feel someone around me, and I look up and there is no one there. Is that a sign of the shift? Yeah, that is a sign of the shift. Absolutely. Your other senses are beginning to open. Oh, if you guys, I would hate to end the live just because I have to go to the bathroom, but if you guys could give me 2 minutes, I do have to go to the bathroom. I am back. All right, let's continue with Q&A. My face is glowing. It's probably because I put moisturizer on. Ishmael, I've been having some strange dreams, insane dreams for the past few months, like being flooded with rapid memories of dreams I haven't thought about in years, randomly in the day and burst. What could this mean? I'm not sure. I am not sure. Joyful, thank you for the super chat. What do light codes look like in the sky? I have been seeing some amazing things over my backyard. Amazing UFOs and feathers and faces in the clouds. That's interesting. It sounds to me like your third eye is opening. That's what it sounds like. Your third eye is opening, so you're able to see things a little better. Hmm? Oh, yes. I was just interviewed this morning by David Nino Rodriguez, for those that watch him. And I think he's going to post the interview this Tuesday. And please give me some support, Galactic Jedis. Go in there and write some good reviews and comments, because he has a strong Christian, fundamentalist Christian following. And one of the reasons why I try not to go on his show much is because I always get butchered by his Christian followers who call me a New Ager, because they don't understand the galactic stuff. They think all aliens are demons. So I was trying to put everything into biblical perspective. Okay, so please support me. He's going to drop the interview this Tuesday. You guys are going to back me up. And I don't have nothing against his Christian audience. I just think that they have to be more open-minded with this galactic stuff. They don't really understand the metaphysical properties of existence. So I'm just trying to plant seeds and hopefully get them to become more aware of things, so that when the disclosure happens, they don't have cognitive dissonance. All right. Peaceful Warrior, thanks so much for your super chat. Hi, Ishmael. Last 2 months, I'm feeling nothing seems make sense in the outer world anymore. I've already addressed that. On my end, it just came up as a super chat. Yeah, David is a former boxer. That is correct. No, I'm not trying to convert. I'm just trying to plant seeds, so that when the disclosure happens, they're not like, are the grays good or bad? You have grays that are good and you have grays that are bad. Can you speak more about the Lyrans? Well, those are our ancestors. All galactic humanoids, human races, originated in Lyra. They were the first humans to come into existence within our universe. Yes, I like that. Not converting, waking up. I want to help waken his audience. I like that. Yeah, I haven't been on a show in over a year, because every time I do, the comments are always just trashing me. They're calling me New Ager and all this stuff. And, they don't really understand the galactic aspect of things. Well, again, his 95% of his audience they're Christian. They're fundamentalist Christians. So unless it's in the Bible, they don't want to hear about it. So they have that attitude. So it's very hard to go on an interview on his platform when 95% of his people are extremely religious. Yes, Sunshine says you can handle anything. Of course I can. All right, I have another super chat from my Trumpete. Thank you so much. Hi, Ishmael. Great presentation. Thank you. I have all the time this vision that another version of me in a spaceship inside like a water tank, sleeping and my guides with me. Is it even possible? Absolutely. Yeah, you're actually glimpsing, you're reconnecting or having visions of your galactic self. We all have galactic counterparts that are operating through ships or on motherships or in other planets. All right, I'm going to take one more question and then we're going to do a little prayer, a little meditation. I'm looking for that one question that everybody wants to know about. Are the sisters involved in this too? The seven sisters? Yeah, they are. We are receiving help from the Pleiades. Absolutely. Peaceful Warrior, thank you so much for your super chat. Hi again. How do you deal with beings so called attacked by negative beings to lower vibration? How do you deal with beings so called attacked? I have my own way, but I wanted to know how you deal with it. Well, if there are other humans that are draining your energy, that are bringing you down, disregard them. You don't need them anymore. All right. Create boundaries. If they are non physical entities, then you ground yourself and you surround yourself in a protective shield every morning and every night before going to bed. And not to mention, the best way to protect yourself is by being in your heart. So you go from your head space into your heart space, and they can't mess with you. And before I end today's live, I do have a mailing address. My mailing address is 1771 West State Route 89A, Suite B, box number 3015, Sedona, Arizona 86336. That is my mailing address. Oh, I like this. I do have a lot of Christian followers that are open-minded, apparently. And one of them is Greg. Valentina's another. Greg says, as a Christian, I respect your teachings and I love you. Cosmic origin was removed from the Bible, so I love you teaching this. I'm glad that you recognize that. Thank you for stating that, brother. You guys are so welcome. All right, so let's do a little meditation just to end the live on a positive note. All right, so at this time, I would love for all of you to center yourselves by going within, taking a few deep breaths. Now, tonight, I would like to pray for all of the light warriors, chosen ones that are getting attacked, whether it is through non-physical entities or physical people that are instruments for dark entities. I would like to pray for all of the people that are being attacked. I want to pray for their protection, for their empowerment, and most importantly, for their ascension. There is a huge attack on the light warriors right now. And so I want to focus on protecting all the light warriors, the chosen ones, 144,000, the millions of volunteers that are being attacked at this time. We put a wall of protection around you